Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to dive into a beautifully personal, incredibly poetic manifesto on civic duty. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating piece of writing called Musings, Nigeria is Mine. Now, when most of us think about citizenship or our civic duty, we tend to picture passports, voting booths, maybe paying taxes. It feels very institutional, right? Very bureaucratic. But the source material we're looking at today completely shatters that cold framework. It replaces it with something deeply intimate, passionate, and fiercely protective. We're going to see exactly how one writer reconstructs the relationship between a citizen and their country, turning it from just a legal obligation into an act of profound personal devotion. Just listen to this. Nigeria is my baby. My baby is Nigeria. No crying is necessary. I mean, that is an incredibly bold claim. Think about it for a second. Nigeria is a nation of over 200 million people. It's vast and wonderfully complex. To lay claim to something of that sheer scale as a deeply personal responsibility, that's radical. Right out of the gate, she flips the traditional idea of citizenship completely on its head. Usually we think of the nation as the parent, the motherland or the fatherland, and we're the children who need to be protected and provided for. But here, she reverses that dynamic entirely. The nation isn't the parent, the nation is the child. It's the citizen who has to step up as the protector, the provider, the caregiver. It's a striking shift in perspective that pulls us into a totally different mindset about what we actually owe to the places we call home.
So you're probably wondering, who is the mind behind this powerful reframing? Meet Oyoyomi Ola David. She is a proud Nigerian, and in her own words, she is someone who deeply loves people and is highly focused on global development. What is absolutely crucial to understand about her is that she is a solutions generator and a policy influencer. She isn't just writing poetry in a vacuum here, she's actively looking at how to transform society. And her worldview, it's deeply anchored in her faith. She describes her Father God as the wheel within my wheels. Knowing her background is super important because it shows us that her poetic musings aren't just abstract art. They're a direct, faith-driven, solutions-oriented framework for how she intends to influence policy and generate real-world change in her country.
Section 1. The author's vision, transforming civic duty. She grounds this massive, grand vision in the most fundamental unit of society we have, the home. She writes, "Nigeria is my home. I will keep her clean." Notice how she frames national responsibility. It's not some distant burden for the government to deal with, it's intimate, personal housekeeping. If you wouldn't just toss trash in the middle of your own living room, why would you do it on the streets of your country? She's basically telling us that the boundaries of our personal homes don't actually stop at our front doors. They extend all the way to the borders of the nation itself.
Now, jumping from beautiful poetry to a simple plea not to litter might feel a bit jarring, but honestly, that's exactly her point. Civic duty actually starts with those everyday, tangible actions. The lofty ideal of loving your country is proven in the mundane choices we make every single day. Her words act as a really practical framework. Citizenship isn't just about grand speeches on national holidays. It's about the daily, disciplined choice to not litter, to maintain order, and to respect the shared physical space we all live in. She takes the theoretical and makes it completely actionable.
Section 2. Nurturing a nation, the country as a living entity.
Here we encounter a profound metaphor, the country as a patient. This is a deeply vulnerable image. It openly acknowledges that the nation isn't perfect. In fact, it might be ailing or struggling right now. But look at her commitment here. No neglect is desired. I will keep her watch. She doesn't abandon the patient just because it's sick. She commits to the bedside vigil. It is such a powerful statement against cynicism. When institutions fail or society is struggling, the natural instinct for so many of us is to just look away or complain about the neglect. Her response? The exact opposite. She actively commits to being the one who watches, who cares, and who absolutely refuses to let the patient suffer alone.
She expands on this whole concept of nurturing with some brilliant additional metaphors. Think about a baby. A baby cries when it needs something, right? But she pledges to keep the nation so well-nourished that no crying is necessary. Or take a garden. A garden definitely doesn't tend itself. If you leave it alone, weeds just take over. By declaring the nation as her garden and promising to keep her trim because no weed is wanted, she's emphasizing that civic health requires constant, intentional maintenance. Treating a nation like a garden that you have to actively weed completely shifts how we see things. It tells us that peace, prosperity, and order, they aren't default states. They're the result of deliberate, ongoing civic participation.
Section 3. Cultivating civic growth. Engines of progress.
This is where her solutions-oriented mindset totally shines. She maps out specific institutional metaphors and their core threats.
For the school, she identifies arrogance as the problem. Think the arrogance of ignorance or the refusal to grow, and she promises to keep the nation learned. For the market, the absolute heart of the economy, the threat is cheating. Without trust, markets just collapse, so she commits to keeping it profitable through integrity. And for the farm, which represents sustenance and agriculture, the threat is drought. Yet, she promises to keep it fruitful. She isn't just offering vague patriotism here. She is actively targeting the specific ethical and operational decay that threatens the real engines of progress in a society.
So, if we were to take Ola David's framework and formally define civic growth, it would look a little something like this. It's the active, personal prevention of institutional decay to ensure national profitability, learning, and fruitfulness. It is not passive. It's a highly proactive, solutions generator approach. She looks at the school, the market, the farm, and essentially says, these are mine to protect. She's taking real, personal ownership of macroeconomic and societal outcomes. Section 4. Heritage and Intimate Identity Beyond Geography. Notice the amazing contrast here between a fierce, defensive posture and a highly collaborative one. On one hand, she claims Nigeria as her heritage. Now, a heritage is something sacred, handed down through generations. She states, "No trespassing is worthy, I will keep her preserved." That is a fierce, highly protective stance over her cultural identity. But then, right next to that, she calls the nation her village. A village implies community, closeness, and, let's be honest, inevitable friction. Yet her commitment here is incredibly optimistic. No conflict is irresolvable, I will keep her peaceful. She beautifully balances the intense guarding of her heritage with a deep, patient commitment to community peace-building and conflict resolution.
And this brings us to what might be the most surprisingly intimate metaphor in the entire text. Nigeria is my spouse is Nigeria, no divorce is sweet, I will keep her loved. Just think about the weight of that. By comparing her relationship with her country to a marriage, she elevates citizenship from just a legal status to a lifelong, unbreakable vow. You don't just walk away from a spouse when times get tough, right? You work on it, you endure, and above all, you keep them loved. It is a profoundly moving statement on loyalty and the deep emotional bond a person can have with their homeland.
We live in an era that is heavily characterized by global movement, anxiety, and a profound sense of displacement for so many people around the world. But here, she counters those modern anxieties head-on. She boldly declares the nation as her place, affirming that, "No displacement is permanent, I will keep her secure." She confidently anchors her own sense of security and belonging entirely within her national identity. In a chaotic, unpredictable world, she has decided exactly where her roots lie, and she takes full personal responsibility for ensuring the security of that space.
Section 5. The Ultimate Commitment, Pride and Dignity.
She issues a powerful, absolute rejection of national shaming. No shaming is truth. I will keep her dignity. It is incredibly common in modern discourse for citizens to complain about, mock, or even shame their own countries when things go wrong. But she draws a hard line in the sand right here. She champions dignity as the ultimate civic responsibility. She refuses to let the narrative of her home become one of shame, asserting that keeping her nation's dignity intact is just as vital as keeping its markets profitable or its streets clean.
And it all culminates in this beautifully simple, declarative, 5-word sentence: I am a Nigerian. After all the metaphors, the baby, the garden, the market, the spouse, the patient, it all distills down to this absolute statement of identity. It perfectly seals her ultimate commitment to her musings. It's no longer just a metaphor. It is a concrete reality. She owns her identity with absolute finality and immense pride. And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. Oluyomi Ola David offers a radical, solutions-driven framework for civic duty, taking it from a distant obligation and turning it into an act of intimate, daily caretaking. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Look at your own relationship with where you live. If you truly claimed your country, your city, or your community as your own, as your garden, your patient, your home, what would you keep safe? How would your everyday actions change? Thank you for exploring this fascinating perspective with me today. Keep asking great questions and keep learning.